Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome a remarkable guest, Dr. Dale Atkins. Dr. Atkins is the author of The Turquoise Butterfly. Welcome, Dr. Dale. How are you?
I'm wonderful and happy to be with you and look forward to our conversation.
Yes, I've been looking forward to it. Is it okay to call you Dale for the interview?
Please. Okay. Yes, please.
So Dale, for our viewers and listeners who may not be familiar with you, why don't you share a little bit about your professional background?
I'm happy to, Lance. I'm a psychologist, and my background early on was in special education, what was then called special education, and I worked with families of children who had all kinds of differences. And in my 50-year career, I have worked with families and individuals in adapting to all kinds of life's challenges and changes at different times of life. And so I've worked with families, and I've worked with individuals, as I said. I've worked with couples, but my background is in special education and early childhood development, and then lifespan development. And I've worked a lot in the space of dementia and Alzheimer's and caregiving, not only because my dad had Alzheimer's for many years, and he was first diagnosed when he was 61. That really informed a lot of my own orientation, both professionally and personally, in the caregiving space. And so over the years, I've written, this is my 8th book, my first children's book, and I write about things that have to do with families and relationships and issues having to do with adapting to life and trying to be as balanced as we can. And this all brought me to the point where I wanted to write this book about the turquoise butterfly.
So despite being a children's book, the Turquoise Butterfly really shares many grown-up intellectual messages, and you share them with a sweet story between young Victoria and her grandmother, Sylvia. Why are intergenerational, whether it be grandparent to grandchild, great aunts or uncles to nieces and nephews, so important?
They're so important because the elders in our lives are really the keepers of the memories and the keepers of the stories. And for so many families that are so caught up in a pace that is accelerated and rushing and kind of very, very intense, the older person in the family or the older person in the community who's really close to this young person offers something that is really unique. And it's generally what I like to refer to as slow wisdom, where there's an opportunity to be with a person who knows you, who cares about you, who listens to you, who's generally not in a rush, and who's very accepting and open and curious to who you are, the way you do things. And there isn't another agenda of hurry up, we have to go here, hurry up, we have to go there, or there's so many things going on that we don't have time to have that moment of quiet and silence and just general coziness. So that's one thing that is kind of all-encompassing. The reason I wrote the book about Grandma Sylvia and her young granddaughter, Victoria, is they were very different. Victoria is a little girl who is based on a compilation of a lot of children that I worked with over the years, and also one of my grandchildren. A little girl who's hesitant, very curious, very eager to be a part of the world, but a little anxious. And because of that, she doesn't really take risks, and she doesn't really look like she's brave. So here she is paired with this unbelievably adventurous grandmother who likes to take risks, but also wants to be respectful of the little girl and her timetable and her pace. And I wanted to make this a model, Lance, for how people who are different, whether they're related or not, can really develop relationships based on love and presence and different perspectives and patience. And so that's really the model. And when we talk about caregiving, because very much in the book there are issues having to do with caregiving, the grandmother for the little girl, and then ultimately the little girl for the grandmother, what do you notice about the person that they need from you? Not that you must give to them, but what they need. And then can you muster up what they need and present yourself as a person who can really offer care in a way that feels authentic and trustworthy. So these older generations meeting with younger generations are so connected, and that's really the point. There is a different kind of connection. It's almost like a safety zone, and because, as I said before, the richness of stories, the richness of shared experience, the richness of memories allows children to not only feel safe and open, but it gives the older person an opportunity to kind of play with their own life in a way that they can share it. And it means something because this child is part of a long line, a line that came well before them, a line that will continue after the grandparent is no longer here. So there's this continuity.
Yeah, absolutely. And, explain, Dale, how having a consistent, supportive, and loving relationship with an older relative can help both the relative and the child. And really, where does caregiving play a role in the deepening of that interage relationship?
I really love that you brought this up because it is in the caregiving. And, so many people think of grandparents as just babysitters, and they are not just babysitters. They are a link to the past, and they are kind of walking with this child from a different perspective into their future. So the care is, yes, it's taking care of them physically, but it's taking care of them emotionally. And the younger child or teenager or young adult are also taking care of the emotional and spiritual life of the older adult as the older person perhaps slows down, needs help, because what happens is the younger person develops empathy, develops compassion, develops a sensitivity that other young people who don't have this consistent engagement with a grandparent or a great aunt or just an elder who is connected to them, they don't seem to have. There's some interesting studies now, Lance, that really confirm not only the physical connection and the physical benefits, both for older and younger, but also the emotional and the mental and the spiritual benefits. Because with older people, you have to really pay attention. And if you're sharing stories, you've got to know sequencing. You've got to be able to remember not only what happened, but when it happened. And you've got to be able to organize things. If you're playing with children, if you're putting together Legos or you're building a model, you have to have rather nimble fingers, and you've got to be able to do planning. So all of these are challenges for the brain, which we wouldn't normally get if we weren't in these kinds of intimate situations. And as far as physical, just taking walks or playing, getting up and down, these are things that really help to keep us nimble. And the other is this amazing connection emotionally. Very many older people and very many younger people now are lonely. They are alone a lot, or with the children, they're very much on their devices, thinking they're connected, but they're not connected in the way that really helps one feel confident and not lonely. And so older people with this interaction, the social engagement, often report feeling less lonely, also less depressed. And there are some studies that I'm sure you're aware of that have to do with the more engagement and the more the older person is socially and mentally and emotionally engaged, the less likely they are to probably get early dementia. And these studies are really being examined now. And there's an interesting amount of time that young people and older people do well together, and it's kind of a moderate exposure. And when they're used to each other, they depend on each other, they know, they have their little routines, they have rituals and traditions that they share. But there's time for rest and there's time for recovery. When older people are taking care of younger people full time and don't have support and don't have peers who really understand what it is they're going through, they don't do as well, understandably, because they're exhausted and they don't have the social support. But when there is a moderate amount of engagement and it works for both parts of the dyad, it really is an amazing benefit for, as I said, emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I shared with you, I spent my entire childhood and my teens going down and spending the summer with my grandparents down in the South. And those are some of the greatest, fondest memories I have. But it also, I feel like, gave me an appreciation and a better understanding for those older than me, my elders, if you will, older than my parents. And, I feel like there's a lot of benefit, like you shared, Dale, not only to the children, but also to the, their aged loved one, getting to have that camaraderie, learning from each other. I know, like, my children have taught my wife's mother, how to use a tablet and things. And, that's given her an extension of being able to stay connected more. It doesn't replace the in-person experience, but I feel like it at least gives them an outlet to be able to have some sort of form of communication when they are living alone.
It's so important, and I think it's one of the amazing benefits of what we're doing now, because you can read to a child on FaceTime, you can play a game, you can listen to music, you can do art projects, you can do all kinds of things. We learned that a lot during COVID, and I think that for many people, they have appointments with their grandchildren, and they are engaged with them in ways that they wouldn't be had they not had this kind of connection with those specific kids. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, and maybe you experienced this when you were a younger person, when you were a kid, is so often the children will really engage with their grandparents and confide in them with stories or events or just situations that they wouldn't feel comfortable telling their parents. And then the grandparents become the secret keeper, but they have to decide what they're going to share with the parents of the child. But that this is another person, another human being that this child develops a trusting relationship with, so that it's not just the parents and it's not just the siblings, it's this person who is connected to them, who loves them unconditionally, and with whom they can share their life. And for the older person, as you said, they're not only learning about technology, they're learning about what this kid's view of the world is, which is very different. The world is so different from when we were growing up, when I was growing up. I have 6 grandchildren and the eldest is 21. And they're constantly asking me questions about what it was like then, kind of what I used to ask my grandmother. But I'm watching them negotiate a world which is so different, particularly because of tablets and social media. And they're teaching me, and I'm also eager to know, why they're studying this and not that. What is it about that that's so interesting to them, so that they open worlds to me that really pique my curiosity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my kids will even ask me, what was it like not having TV growing up? And I said,
right.
TV was around long before I was born. Not to worry, I'm not that old. Dale, you had mentioned, previously that you've authored 8 books. The Turquoise Butterfly being your first children's book. What made you want to create a children's book to tell your story?
Well, here it is. I'll hold it up so you can see it. It's simple. I wanted to write a simple book about complex subjects. And it seemed to me at this point in my life that all the books that I've written have been about relationships, and they're either about books or how-to books, and I've been very fortunate and people have been very responsive. At this moment in time, I really wanted to accentuate and also offer ideas for grandparents in particular and parents of how to honor and to nurture the connection between grandparents and grandchildren, or as we said before, just elders and younger people. And I wanted to do it in a way where I could discuss things that are not easy to discuss with children. And among those things have to do with anxiety, as I mentioned before, aging, adapting to difficult situations and surprising situations, and trying to develop a sense of confidence and trust, and also talking about the slowing down of an older person and the ultimate death of the older person, and how that person's memory and spirit can stay alive and nurtured when that person isn't here. And I also wanted to honor my late mother, whose name was Sylvia. And she was a phenomenal human being. She was a wonderful mother, grandmother, great-grandmother. And she was bold, and she was like a butterfly, and she loved turquoise butterflies. So the whole theme of the butterfly throughout the book is not only about change and transformation and boldness, but also how we can remember someone with something that flutters by, in this case, the butterfly. People tell me they are often reminded of someone who was important in their life when they see a particular bird, when they hear a particular song, when they have a sense memory, either they smell something or they're visiting a place, and that person comes to mind. And what I wanted to try and do, Lance, was help families be encouraged to find ways to nurture the love that is in the present moment, and to create a time when people are not with us, that we're not afraid to recall their names, that we're not afraid to laugh and cry at the same time about a story that we might have heard or something that we shared, because this is really what children connect with when they feel a part of a family, a clan, a community. It is the details of the person. You know, why were you named Lance? Were you named after someone? What was it about that name that your mom and dad liked? What is it about my name, Dale? I was named after David, a great-grandfather whom I never met, but yet I know stories about him. And I think that it's very important for children to have a sense of who they are as part of their identity formation, where they came from, and again, as I said before, where they are in the line of their family or their people. And that's really important when a grandmother says, this is what we do, this is who we are, living the values and then following a moral compass that has been a directive in your life or your religion or your culture, to teach dances and music that are unique to who your people are, helps children feel grounded and then open to other people and their cultures and their traditions. And grandparents and great uncles and aunts can do this so comfortably.
Absolutely. You know, Dale, you mentioned, that Sylvia, the grandmother in the book, is based on your mother. Tell us a little bit about her and glimpses of her to look for in the book.
Well, there's a picture of her behind me, and in the book, I worked very closely with this wonderful, wonderful illustrator whose name is Amelina Jones, and she really did take my guidance. I sent her pictures of my mother because I really wanted my mother to be the model. So here she is. The first picture we see is she's bright and she's smiley and she has turquoise on, and she's looking with great wonder and excitement. And here's this one I love. She's she's in the garden with her strappy sandals and her earrings, and she's picking beautiful flowers. And her granddaughter is getting ready to come and see her, and we see that she's a little worried. And she's got a room that's kind of a mess because she's packing and she doesn't really know exactly what she should bring, and she's a little concerned. So the first thing we see is that this grandmother, who is so loving and gives her granddaughter a butterfly hug, and the little girl, as she's coming out to see her, is clutching her backpack because she's a little concerned, a little worried. Grandma Sylvia is someone who is ferociously engaged with life. She's on the slide, they're feeding the ducks, she's at the library, they're walking the dogs. But then what they do, and she's very engaged, just as my mother was. All the places that they went to are the places that my mother would go with her grandchildren. And they're at the beach, and she was always at the beach generally in a turquoise bathing suit. And here they are, and that's when the first event that is problematic occurs. And what happens is there's a current, and they're drifting away from each other, and the little girl is really starting to panic. And rather than use the word panic, I talk about her belly butterflies, and I talk about what's happening with her belly so that kids can relate to a physical feeling, because they're not generally going to say, oh, I think I'm worried. They're going to first have a response in their belly. And so part of what the book is about is to try and help children recognize what the signs are of anxiety, and then how to self-soothe, how to get themselves to feel better. In this case, the next picture is the grandmother, Sylvia, who would do this. She would try and solve the problem, but not by solving it, by saying, let's lean back. Let's pretend we're a butterfly. Let's float down and see. Let's let the current carry us. So she acknowledges the little girl's anxiety and hesitancy and fear, but she says, what might we do about that? And what does she do? She says, let's sing a song. And this is the first time that we see butterfly, butterfly in the sky, like a flower floating by. And what she's doing is she's giving the little girl something to hang on to. And when we do this with children, we could give them a little phrase to say, a song to sing, a prayer to say, how to breathe, but that they are able to control what's going on within themselves, even if they can't control the environment. And Sylvia was very much like this. She would try to help people get through difficult situations. And that's kind of who she was. She lived to be almost 98 years old. She was planning her 98th birthday party. There were already about 96 people who had said they were coming. She would have a jazz band. She was a remarkable person who loved life, loved people of all ages. And as a daughter of this type of mother, I was always exposed to the world with a sense of wonder, like, oh, we don't know about that, but we should learn about that. And she brought people into our lives who were from different backgrounds, who were artists, who were dancers, who were creative, who were thinkers, because that's what the world was. And I wanted to honor her and her role as wonderful person who was way ahead of her time, but also as a loving, tender, patient grandmother who had many grandchildren, many great-grandchild, each of whom was different, and she adapted to them, and she had wonderful, loving relationships.
That's beautiful, Dale. Thank you for sharing that. You know, we've talked about the butterfly, throughout this interview. Just explain why the butterfly. What symbolism does that butterfly carry for you in the book?
Well, as I mentioned, my mother loved butterflies. Today, even this morning when I was having a walk, I saw a butterfly. Whenever I see a butterfly, I think of my mom and something that comes to me. It was important to her to be able to understand that life is filled with ups and downs. She did not have an easy life, but she had a very easy attitude. She had a very positive attitude, and she had many losses in her life. and she integrated those losses. She did not pretend that they didn't happen. So I think of her as, the caterpillar, the chrysalis, the emerging butterfly. And butterflies, unlike my mom, butterflies don't live long, but they live well. They live brilliantly. They are so engaged. And the struggle of a chrysalis trying to get out of its own way and become the magnificent butterfly. And how the butterfly, which is a symbol in many, many cultures of life eternal and transformation. This little girl in the book transforms. She transforms from a hesitant, afraid, and always curious little girl into a much braver little girl. She still is hesitant. She's still a little bit worried. She still has the butterflies, but she manages and she overcomes. She gets through. And the grandmother is also transforming from this brilliant, running around, always challenging grandmother. She gets a little slower, and within the book, she starts walking with a cane. The little girl is leading her, and then ultimately she passes away, and the little girl integrates the butterfly and feels the spirit of her grandmother with her all the time. And the other thing is, for many, many young children in particular, they can relate to the life of a butterfly and the arc of a butterfly's life when it has to do with the death of someone, so that we can talk about death with these transitional objects, one of which very commonly is a butterfly.
That's wonderful. You mentioned earlier about not calling it anxiety, but, butterflies in the belly.
Yeah.
Without you calling and labeling it that in the book, what are some of the coping mechanisms and skills to overcome and help to build resilience and self-reliance? What are some of the things people can do when facing those unknowns and feeling uncomfortable when facing them?
Well, I think the feeling of uncomfort and discomfort is very common, and so often we try and run away from it, or we punish ourselves by feeling a certain way. And the reason, by the way, that I don't like to use she's an anxious child, because she's a child who's experiencing and feeling anxiety. Because when we put the label right there, that kind of defines the child, and I think, or the person. And I think that we're so much more than some of the feelings that we have. And so I like to talk about them with the person as, what does that feel like when that happens? When your hands get clammy, when you can't have any saliva in your mouth, when you feel those butterflies or your head is thumping, that really feels awful. And so, what is it that you might be able to think or do or feel that might help you calm yourself a little bit? Just to pay attention. And the first thing is to not be hard on yourself, to not criticize yourself, and to not say, "Oh my God, I can't believe this is happening again." Sometimes when I get upset, I get butterflies in my stomach. But I know I'll get through it. I got through it before, the last time when this happened. So you try and step back a little bit. And when you're in a full-blown one of these, it's really hard. So you just have to just kind of sit with it. And sometimes people can do this with their hands and pull and get back into their body, not just focusing on the butterflies or the headache. One of the things that we do in the book that I do is, and I call it a butterfly hug, but in fact, a butterfly hug, which is this, is a polyvagal way of calming ourselves. So we can teach adults and children how to calm themselves by physically addressing what might be going on. Sometimes children can just go like this. I say, why don't we pretend we're a little butterfly going up and down our cheeks, all around our head? So you take the focus and just shift it. You don't deny it. The last thing I want people to say, "Oh my God, you're such a baby. I can't believe that you're afraid of this." No, I can see why you're afraid. What do you think we can do to go through it anyway? What should we do? Should we hold hands? In the book, the grandmother reaches out and they look at the sky and they start to sing. I think that what happens is we get stuck at the point of when we're frozen and we don't realize we're going to thaw. We don't give ourselves time to thaw. Maybe if I'm stuck, I should just stay here for a little while. What should I do? I can think about someone who can help me. I can think about someone who always told me I could get through something. I can just relax and feel my feet on the ground. I'm okay. At this moment, I'm okay. How shall I get out of this? And talk ourselves through it, or just for the moment, stop, and if we can, breathe. Sometimes, if the breath is very like that, it's hard to tell somebody to calm down. But you can tell someone, would you put your hand on your belly? And just breathe into your belly and feel your breath through your belly. Okay, now it might be, and then it'll calm down. Or could you put your hand on your heart and just hold your heart for a minute? So many of us will know to do that with a child. Here, come here, let me give you a hug, and you'll feel a little stronger. But we don't do it for ourselves. So just calm yourself by putting your hand on your heart and say, this is hard, but I know you'll be able to do it. These are ways, and there are so many. And by the way, on my website, I have a lot of these suggestions for how we can get through. But the most important suggestion is to not be critical of yourself when you kind of feel like, oh my gosh, I can't do this, or you're scared. Yeah, I can understand why you're scared. But we can do things. Remember the story your grandma told you when she was scared and how she got through it? You're just like your grandma. You can do that. So the more stories we tell about positive experiences and also difficult experiences, that was really a hard time when your grandpa had this happen in business and had to build up again. That was awful. They had to sell the house, they had to sell the farm, whatever. But we can get through these things. You can get through this. What do you need? And if you're there with a person, what do you need from me? I just need you to sit next to me. I can do that.
Yeah, just provide that comfort. Losing a loved one is really central and a delicate theme. How can we help to prepare young people for death and dying so that they can go forward, but also so they can leave a legacy?
It's so important. I think we prepare them by the way we live our life. It's like when we're doing something together and we're having such a good time and say, oh, I'm so happy that at some point, and I hope it's in the distant, distant future when I'm not here, I hope you'll remember that we cooked together. I hope you'll remember this and do this with your children if you have children. I love this song and I love that we sing together. When I listen to this song, I think about my mom because she loved that song. There is a part of life that we sometimes block off, and it's the part of life that deals with death. And so many children, for many children, the first person they're going to lose is their grandparent. And I think it makes sense that it should be the grandparent who talks about their own experience with losing people and what they hope will go on after they're not here. What will be their legacy? I think we can say, you are part of my legacy. You say this to a child and say, the way we work at the soup kitchen? I hope that when I'm not here, you'll find a way to volunteer and help your community the way we did together. And that's an important part of what is important to me. And that's part of my legacy. It's not about just the will and who gets the painting and who gets the necklace. It's what are your values that you want to leave with your children and grandchildren, and how you live your life when you're here and well and healthy helps them to internalize that that's part of who they are. And then when you're not well and healthy, you can still refer back to it. You can still talk about or do things, hopefully, that were important to you. And if you're a person who is having memory issues and can't really be the person to share those stories firsthand, other people can share them about you and say, this was important to your mom when your mom was really out there in the world teaching or helping children or whatever it was, so that children are prepared for living without the people that they love. They're prepared because they have a storehouse of memories, of stories, of experiences. And the other thing is that I think is important is to say, I know when you think about me, you're going to be sad because I'm not going to be here. But I hope you'll also be happy about the times that we had together. And this, Lance, is where the butterfly comes in. And when you hear that song or when you see that butterfly, know that I am here with you. Know that I am with you. Know that I am part of you and that you are part of me. And that love is eternal. I think what is so important for children to understand is that a relationship with a person who dies doesn't end. It just changes. You still have the relationship with the memory of that person, and you still have the relationship with the love that you felt from that person. You know, why are you so sensitive to older people? Well, because when my grandmother got older, she had a really hard time walking, and I know that I had to slow down and I had to watch for her. And she's not here anymore, but that sensitized me, and I'm really sensitive now to older people. Or why do you love dogs? Well, I love dogs because my grandmother used to rescue dogs, and I learned from a young age. This is how we have the relationship with the person who is no longer with us at this moment in time, but they are with us in time eternal if we are open to that.
Right. Yeah. Great advice, Dale. I want to just ask you as we're closing here, first, can you share your website? We're going to have it up on the screen as well in the show notes.
Oh, yes.
But for our listeners, where would you like them to go to learn more about you?
Well, thank you for that. It's www.drdaleatkins.com. So it's DRDALEATKINS.com. And I also try to have an Instagram account. I'm not very good with social media, but I'm trying. I'm also on LinkedIn, and I'm hoping that you, Lance, and I will be connected on LinkedIn, and that All Home Care Matters will be part of my page. And I'm on Facebook also, Dale Atkins, Dr. Dale Atkins. And I love to engage with people. I hope that they would be happy to get the book. I love that they would perhaps sign up for my newsletter, which is a free newsletter. I write it every month. It's called Sanity Savers and More. Sanity Savers was the name of one of my books. And I offer insights about life and family and change. And it's kind of grounding, I hope, and uplifting at the same time. So I welcome people to join and let me know how they're doing. I'm very, very interested in what I recently have come to know, because I've been referring to it as intergenerational and intragenerational relationships, are now often referred to as interage relationships and interage engagements, which I like a lot because it also expands more out into the community to engage with elders from different places and times of life. So I invite people to become a part of an interage community, and whether they're relatives or not, and to volunteer and engage with people from different decades and share your life and your wishes and your goals, and listen to people from different times of life, people who have lived longer than you, shorter than you, and really learn from them. We have so much to learn from each other.
Absolutely. In closing, Dale, what are you hoping people will take away from the book and how it's going to help them, specifically in the caregiving space?
I'd like people to become more present for each other. I'd like them to become more patient with each other, and I'd like them to listen to what the other really needs and wants, rather than coming with a full-blown agenda of what we think people need and want because of our needs. And I think in the caregiving space in particular, whether you are taking care of or helping to care for a parent or a sibling or a child, that these people are very much still people and have their own view of life. And how can we match what they feel they need with what we might feel they need? But it's also not just about taking care. It's really being side by side and still learning from the moments that we have with people. And caregiving is very, very tiring. It can be very demanding. It can be very lonely. It can be very demanding physically and emotionally. And to have support, I think that we must be able to understand those of us who are caregiving, and those of us, well, most of us are caregiving in some form or another, but to also give support to people who are engaged with caregiving and understand what their life is like with this change and adapt. Because if we really are wanting to be connected and be a community, we need to observe, we need to notice what's around us and who's around us. And things may have changed from how you related to a person a while back because of what they're facing now. And I think what we want to do is not put so much pressure on people. One of the messages of the Turquoise Butterfly is to really observe and then see what you can do to help someone feel comfortable when they're not feeling comfortable, and be there for them as a witness, as a guide, as a support, as a loving presence. And if that message gets across, I'll be one happy girl.
Absolutely. It's a good message. Well, Dr. Dale Atkins, author of The Turquoise Butterfly, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today and sharing this powerful message. We'll have links to the book and to your website in the show notes, and we look forward to maybe welcoming you back again in the future.
Thank you, Lance, and I look forward to being connected to you through LinkedIn and Facebook and joining your community. Thank you for having me and for featuring the Turquoise Butterfly. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much, Dale.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Dr. Dale Atkins for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.